Tēnā koe, rua pe'u tōku maunga, te awa tupua tōku awa, Aotea tōku waka, te te haunui a paparangi tōku iwi, ko Lisa Warbrick ahau, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora, welcome to my kōrero, as brief as it is, Māori participation in genomics research. Genomics research, let's define, I guess, what that means by our, I'm not going to read that, so genomics is the study of all DNA in an organism. What's interesting for me is we as Māori can refer to it or call it whakapapa. So genomics to me, anyway, is whakapapa. To what extent do Māori participate in and benefit from genomics? This has been my, I guess, research learning for the last couple of years, and I'm going to share with you by the end of this brief kōrero how it's influenced me and the impact that's having, I guess, not in just terms of what I do, but those that I engage with in terms of whenua Māori. So let's talk about Māori participation in genomics research. Most would argue, I would suggest that participation for Māori would start with our language, with te reo Māori. The fact that we don't have, for example, a lexicon at the moment that embeds or includes at the very least that our Māori, which we know comes with the mātauranga or the knowing and the being of Māori, unless we start with our language. It's interesting to, the discussion could be around how well then Māori can truly participate in genomics research. So te reo Māori and participation are closely linked. Then let's talk about rangatiratanga and mana motuhake. Briefly, very briefly or broadly, we're talking leadership and self-participation. So the expectation is for Māori to participate in and therefore benefit from genomics research. There has to be the leadership and the self-direction for Māori, or self-determination for Māori to be able to define how that looks, how we navigate te ao Māori, and I guess in this instance, Western science. So how do we do that? How is that measured? And then there's the whanaungatanga, the relationship of Māori participation within genomics research. How do Māori access information to genomics research? How do we measure the impact? How do we? And so it's that relationship across all Māori too, I would suggest. So we have whānau, we have hapu, we have iwi. And it would be arguable to say that a lot of the information comes in top head and doesn't always filter down. In this instance, my reference to Māori landowners or whenua Māori, where our whānau and our hapu are emerging into taking ownership of their own tino rangatiratanga and their own mana motuhake. So the relationship to genomics research, how do Māori engage, get access to, and then translate that to their meaning. So this is the cool part for me. Where's my research led me? Well, let's go back to the language. We don't have a lexicon in genomics research of te reo Māori. Yet if Māori are to participate in genomics research, the opportunity sits there to develop a lexicon of te reo Māori for genomics research. And so it's in this context that I've been able to start a conversation, or at least drive a project to develop, or at least get started, this lexicon. Now let's talk about, I mentioned rangatiratanga and mana motuhake, our leadership, our self-determination. The history or the footprint that I'm aware of is if you want to get something done, then do it yourself and lead it. So what does it mean when we do genomics research our way? It could start with the Indigenous Genomics Institute as an example. This is our own independent place and space where we don't have to challenge or argue or convince. We just know, as Indigenous peoples, we know what our own Indigenous needs are. So the kete or the po or the place from which we can start encouraging and engaging Māori participation in genomics research is our own institute, is our own place and space. And so I'm fortunate to be part of a project that's leading the opportunity to develop what that Indigenous Genomics Institute might look like with Māori, or indeed Indigenous peoples. It starts with the people. And so Māori engagement is important. Well, it's important. You can't have anything unless the people are there. And so I get involved actively in collectives. And so one such collective is a national collective, interregional, of whenua Māori or Māori land owners and organisations that have an interest in and a desire to develop their whenua papatuanuku from a te ao Māori framework that is sustainable and exerts their rights as kaitiaki. And then we have our businesses and our commercial opportunities that are asking the questions, how can we work our tikanga and our culture with our commercial aspirations, which is a very core kōrero. In every conversation, I'm seeing a growth and an elevation. And so there's opportunity for me to influence these conversations by sharing my learning in the genomics research, science and research as a whole. I've also, in terms of engagement, some of those non-Māori or tauiwi organisations I get involved with, I've become a counsellor of genomics for Aotearoa New Zealand, or GFENS, and we're a collective. It's opened me into this network. So this is a Māori girl, knows nothing about science, now really entrenched in this amazing international network of scientists, bioinformatics. Didn't even know that was a thing, but you don't know until you get involved with these cool people. So as a counsellor for GFENS, I'm able to come from not just my Māori lens, my te ao Māori lens, but from a knowing and a learning and what's happening in science and research today. Again, not just nationally, but internationally. And it's really important if we're talking about how we as Māori participate in genomics research and how then the benefits to not just us, but as we know for our mokos, 20, 50, 100 years ahead of us. These are the benefits we're talking about. The benefits for us is the longevity in our whenua, protecting our taonga species. I guess from here, it's the start of a journey. What I really get, where to from here, it's a really beginning journey. What I'm appreciating the last couple of years is the growth and the emerging conversations and more people, more Māori getting involved in knowing what genomics research influence and potential has for us, but also what's going on without us knowing that affects our taonga species. For example, that's without even talking the genetics, which is a whole different kaupapa. If nothing else from this kōrero, I'd like to leave you with this. Indigenous peoples need to be leading their own conversations in genomics research. That is it. We need to be leading our own conversations, designing what that looks like, being clear that the narrative comes from a te ao Māori perspective, an Indigenous perspective, which might not always gel with Western science, but what it does do is create the unique nature of us and continues to, within genomics science anyway, or genomics research. Whānau, thank you for listening. I want to leave you with this whakatauki from Te Awa Tupua, the people of the river. And I haven't learnt it by heart yet, so aroha mai for reading. E rere kau mai te awa nui, mai I te kaui maunga, ki tangaroa, ko au te awa, ko te awa ko au. The great river flows from the mountain to the sea. I am the river, and the river is me.